The crafter can craft all of the hundreds of item recipes in the game of Minecraft, but it cannot do this on its own, and instead needs some redstone logic. So with the release of the crafter, I immediately started to design several types of automatic crafting systems so you can craft any item you want with ease. Thanks every one of you that stopped by. Hello there, Ray here. Starting with the simplest one, let's work our way up to the most complicated one that can actually craft everything. This one here is your simplest setup, but it can only craft recipes that use one slot. This includes flowers, converting them down into dyes, and other things that also can be converted into dyes. It can also craft out things like your bone into your bone meal, your blaze into your blaze rod, sugar pumpkins into seeds, and break down bigger blocks into smaller ones like slime blocks into slime, redstone into dust, all the different types of minerals, including ingots down to nuggets, your logs into planks, or like kelp blocks into kelp, and convert planks and stones into buttons. For as simple as it is, it actually crafts down some of the most useful items within the game. Now before we look at the next one, if you do want to learn how the crafter actually works, I covered that all in my previous video, which I'll link down below. This next one is just like the first, except we added in another crafter. So what it can do is actually turn your bones down into bone meal, and then those bone meal get put into the second crafter, and that will automatically convert them over to bone blocks. Great for compacting down and transporting. But the downside to these designs here is that this observer clock is constantly going off, no matter if the crafter is actually doing something or if it's not. So next design has a clock that will turn off once the crafter is done crafting. This one's also set up to make bone blocks. We got two crafters and the bone blocks are ending up over here. But the difference is once the bones are being pushed into this crafter, it's being read by this comparator powering this piston, which is connecting these two observers together, making an observer clock. And this is powering this block here, which is also powering this bottom crafter. And when it runs out of materials, it will retract the piston, turning off the clock. Now this comparator that is reading inside of this crafter here is not only reading any items that come into this slot here, but it's also reading these disabled slots. And because of that, it's actually putting off a power of 8, which would normally power this piston down here, but to prevent it from getting powered until we actually have an item in the last slot, we use a little bit of comparator logic here, where we have this comparator on subtraction mode, so it reads the power strength of 8 coming from this container, and then it subtracts it from the power that's coming in this direction here. And what I have over here is just a composter that is completely full to a level of 8, and that also produces a redstone signal of 8. So 8 coming into this side minus the 8 from this side means 0 redstone coming out of that comparator, which doesn't power the piston. The reason why I use a composter here is because composters are really cheap to build, just needing some wood, plus they're also not tile entities, meaning they produce less leg in large amounts. They're pretty easy to fill, just putting it in something that can be composted, and then just leaving it like that produces the perfect signal. But there's currently a bug with crafters at the moment. If I put some bones into this hopper here, once the crafter crafts all of them, they are no longer in this one, but the problem is the comparator doesn't actually notice that the item has left. This is actually called a CBUD, which means a comparator block updater. It's actually kind of cool because if you just place a block beside the comparator, it then remembers that it should turn off, so it's actually a way to detect block updates. The next design solves this problem as it doesn't use a clock at all. So the way that this one works is that when items come into the crafter, the hopper will push one item in, and then this item is being read by this comparator here, which has most of its signal strength removed by this comparator over here, just like we did in that design. And then the rest of the signal goes up all the way over to here, but it normally can't reach this redstone dust here. And only when the item is inside of there will the strength get strong enough to reach all the way to here, and this will activate and power this block, which powers this crafter, which crafts down the item that's inside. But at the same time, it's also powering this hopper here, locking it, preventing another item from quickly going inside the crafter, which could lock up the entire system. This is only needed when we're working with a single slotted item. Because we want the redstone to go a bit further than in that design there, instead of using a completely full composter, we only use one with a level of 6. Now the crafters don't actually have to craft items really fast. That's because the crafter can keep up with most farms and can even be crafting the item as the farm is running, so you don't have to wait for it. And if you do want to make faster, you can just use several crafters all doing the same item. Now we've moved on from the 1x1 grid, and let's look at the 2x1 grid, as this same setup as before can actually do that one, and we can have the input hopper off to the side because we don't need it to be locked every time. This will actually make it a bit faster. And it can actually do quite a few different types of items. So it can like craft down blocks into other types of blocks like pillar block. It can also do all the different types of slabs, where the two different slabs can produce a new type of block. It can also do bamboo into sticks. And if the slots are turned the other direction, it can do stuff like turn wool into carpets and make different types of pressure plates. But one of the coolest things it can actually do is repair tools and gear. And that's because a crafter can do everything a crafting table can do, and repairing stuff is one of those. Also, when stuff gets repaired, it actually gets a boosted durability. So instead of these two bows adding up to 260 durability, you can see we got 279. But this design is actually so useful, it can do any type of recipe as long as all the ingredients are the same type of item. This includes stuff like buckets, paper and composters, horse armor, maps, ingots, leather and bowls, glass bottles, all your different types of armor, shears, bread, carts and boats, lightning rods, trapdoors, doors, decorated pots, crafting tables, honeycomb blocks, bars and panes, snow layers, ladders and chests, honey blocks and furnaces, pots, barrels, melons, amethyst, wool, dripstone, glowstone, clay, snow, brick blocks, wood and stripped wood, purpur, netherwort blocks, magma, prismarine and bricks, quartz blocks, netherite bricks, slabs, stairs and walls, bricks and precious blocks, compact down blocks, as well as a wide variety of different building blocks. So the majority of all the recipes in the game can actually be done just with this little setup here. All these designs are simple enough that if you guys want to build them, just pause the video. But I also will provide the schematics and real downloads in the description. But we can combine this design with the previous clock design, so we can craft things in 2 steps while also being smart about it. So if we come in and place in a whole bunch of gold nuggets, which you get a lot of from gold farms, this first crafter is going to be spamming with these observers, constantly trying to craft up the gold into ingots. But the next crafter is smart, because we just don't want to turn those gold nuggets back straight into ingots, which would happen if we would just constantly power this. So instead we want this one to be smart and only go off when it's completely filled in, easily converting your nuggets into ingots and then right into gold blocks. But what if you're not working with a crafting recipe that uses only one type of block? What if your crafting recipe uses 2 different types of items instead of just a single one? Well, then we need a different type of crafting automated system. And that's this design that I showed in my previous video. But I wanted to compact this down. So I made this design here. We have the crafter in the center, and instead of having hoppers pushing in the items, we're using droppers on either side. We're trying to make ourselves some lovely firework rockets so we can fly around with our elytra. It's important that we make sure that there's always some items in the crafter here, otherwise what could happen is one of the items could run out, and then the dropper could end up putting in some more gunpowder and trying to spread across these 2 slots here. And this is why we needed a smart system that can actually read if we're running out of materials and turn off the entire system. And then once more materials come into the system, the machine automatically knows that and will restart it. But there is a slight flaw with these type of designs. Notice that we have 26 paper in here, and let's say this is a hopper that's pulling more paper from a farm, and we only happen to get 1 paper that goes into it. The 1 paper will come through this dropper, will turn on the system, and it'll start crafting. But it just didn't craft 1 time, it actually crafted 2 times before it noticed that it ran out of paper again and turned off. So the problem is we're slowly losing the items that are inside of this crafter, and eventually they will be gone, and this will break the crafting recipe. So long as you have 2 items coming in at any given time, this system will work. Otherwise what we need is a faster reacting system, and that's what we have over here. So with this one, we also have the crafter in center. We have ingredients coming in from either side, our paper as well as our gunpowder, and they're getting crafted into fireworks. We're also using an observer clock just like the previous one, except that this one would run out of items. This torch is going to turn on, it's going to turn on this redstone, which is going to come over here and power this crafter. When the crafter is powered, it can't actually craft anything more, even though it's still being pulsed with power from the backside over here. But this system fixes the problem from the previous one. So if we take a look at how many paper we have 56, and if we would just have a single one go through the system, it's only going to activate at 1 time, and then the paper is going to replenish that one, and we're going to still be at 56. This works because we have a slower clock powering it, but we also have a faster reacting system to turn it all off. If you enjoy the effort I put into these builds, make sure to leave a like on the video. But this also works with a piston, as long as we're not using some droppers on the side. And this setup is a bit faster than the previous one, because we're not actually directly powering the crafter, which is accidentally also powering the hoppers. Here we have the hoppers not being powered at all, and that way they can push in items faster, which means we can quickly craft up items that use 2 different types of items, but it only works for recipes that use 2 slots. So you can make things like granite and andesite, wax copper things, jack-o'-lanterns, mossy blocks, dyeing wool, trap chest, glow item frames, end rods, coloring different things, candles, copywritten book, fungus on a stick, carrot on a stick, different torches, sticky pistons, levers, minecart combinations, flint and steel, magma cream, an assortment of different dyes, firework stars, cloning maps, eyes of ender, the different types of banner patterns. So this simple system can actually do quite a bit. But let's say you want to do something like TNT or colored glass. Well, that's what this next system does. I designed this so it can actually handle really big recipes. So even if it takes 8 of one item and 1 of the other, it can still handle that. And just like the other system, it will automatically turn off when it runs out of items. That way we don't lose the initial recipe inside of here. With the bigger recipes, it takes a lot longer to fill in all of the slots. And because of that, we need a longer clock. Most of all these repeaters that you see here are just for delay to make it really long. We still have the 2 comparators which are reading each side, making sure that there's enough items in there. We have the 2 torches which will turn on when it runs out of items. But unlike the previous designs where I have the clock separate from the system that's detecting how many items are inside, these are now combined together. So the same comparators which are being used to detect items back here are also being used as a clock. The power is coming from this redstone here, coming over to the comparator. It's in subtraction mode, so it will turn off when this power will subtract from this power, meaning that there'll be a power of 0. The 0 power will end up going through this repeater all the way around through these repeaters, and these repeaters will put it back into this redstone dust here. This turning off of dust will then allow this comparator to read the actual amount of items back here, which then it'll want to put off a redstone signal, which will come through and then light this back up again, repeating the entire process. This is done for both sides and allows the design to be quite compact for what it can actually do. And each of these more complex auto crafters can also do all the recipes from the previous designs. But it's also smart like my previous other designs, and it will turn off once it runs out of items. What it considers running out of items is if there is not a complete stack in all of these slots here. Once that occurs, it won't be able to send a signal off to turn off this torch here. So this torch will remain on so that even though the clock is running down there, this redstone torch is going to come over here and directly power the block underneath of this, which is powering the crafter over here. So you can see this little red arrow means that it's currently powered, but it never turns off, so therefore it can never power anything new. The downside to this is that this clock still runs even though the system isn't crafting anything. You can make it a little bit smaller if you're crafting something like TNT, which doesn't use as many secondary items. You don't need as much delay, so you can actually move this in by 1 block. So it can craft anything that uses 2 different items, but the recipe is any size. So like books, empty map, netherite ingots, brewing stands, glistening melon, tipped arrows, spectral arrows, swords, bows, shields, spyglass, recovery compass, pickaxes, the bundle, compass, fishing rod, lead, clock, shovels, axe, hoe, golden apple, cookie, honey bottle, beetroot soup, golden carrot, rails, calibrated skulk sensor, note block, redstone lamp, TNT, gates, target block, lectern, hopper, dropper, painting, lodestone, respawn anchor, ender chest, shulker box, smithing table, loom, smoker, stone cutter, photographer table, fletching table, colored panes, stained glass pane, fences, jukebox, signs, colored glass, anvils, beehives, lanterns, colored terracotta, armor stands, barrels, banners, beds, item frame, chain, diorite, scaffolding, tinted glass, bookshelf, conduit, dark prismarine, sea lantern, coarse dirt, red nether brick, and it can also do the previous easier recipe types. But we can't quite do every single item recipe, and that's where this next design comes. It doesn't matter what type of recipe it is, this design can do it. Enjoy doing automation in Minecraft? Because that's the main thing I do on my channel, and I even have an entire playlist where I've designed an automatic farm for every item in the game of Minecraft. And now with these auto crafters, it's going to be truly possible. The way this one works is a little bit different than the previous ones. Instead of trying to always hold items inside of the crafters so we know exactly what type of recipe we're going to make, we instead just push in the items in the order that will make the correct item each time. I currently have it set up to make some pistons. Let's go ahead and turn it on. We can watch it. You can see it starts from the top left and puts in each item and just happens to put it in the correct order. That's because we have each of the different items in their own little container, and every piece of the actual piston is all along this. And because there's a total of 9 different slots, we have a total of 9 different droppers. If you're crafting something that doesn't use as many slots, you can always just build a shorter version of this. Those droppers are being fed by these hoppers, and then when they do get powered, they will push their items into these barrels, then they'll get picked up by these hoppers all at the same time. So the items are all lined up, and then they just slowly feed themselves into this crafter here, which will put them in the exact same order that they came down the hopper line. That way one item doesn't come before the other. We're also taking advantage of reading the output of the crafter using a comparator. Now for this comparator on the side here, we're using a power of 8. And crafters are easy to program redstone signals. As for every slot that's disabled, it counts as 1 redstone signal. So we got 8 of them disabled, so we're putting in 8 in there. So once the crafter fills up, it will reach a signal of 9. This will power this redstone dust, but this redstone dust is pointing into this block technically. So even though this one never lights up, it is actually powering this block, which this repeater can read, and we make it go through a repeater so that it's extra strong. It can reach all the way to the far end to power everything all at once. I also put in an on and off switch, so at any time you can actually turn off this machine and it won't break it. What it does is just locks every single hopper at the exact same time. So all the items are just froze in the perfect position so that once you start it back up again, it'll start feeding it in correctly once again. But it also has a smart turn-off system. That's with these comparators here. They're reading how many items are inside these droppers. So when it uses up this last item, then this comparator sees that there's nothing inside of here, and it will no longer keep this torch turned off. And once on, it will light up this entire row of redstone, which does the exact same thing as the turning on and off switch, and will come in here and power all these hoppers so that everything will just completely freeze. And just like the previous systems, when it automatically has more items inside of it, it will just start up once again, putting the items perfectly back in order with no problems whatsoever. And it can also do everything that the previous designs can do, but the disadvantage is that it's slower as well as bulkier, so it's worth using the smaller designs for the simpler recipes. One of the downsides to this design here is that you have the items in individual containers. This means if you need to refill these containers, such as like refilling these planks, they're split between 3 different droppers. And that one might not be too bad, you can hook these all up together. But in some cases, like we have cobble over here, but then there's a space of something else, and then we have cobble, and then cobble here, and something else, and cobble over here. It becomes more difficult to hook all these up to the exact same source. And also get it so that all the items are divided equally, so you don't have to use a ton of extra ones. Now, as I said, this crafter can literally do any crafting recipe. One of the hardest ones is to make cakes. Let's go ahead and turn it on and watch it make some cakes. Puts in all the buckets, everything perfectly, and look at that, guys. We get the cake plus we get the empty buckets, which is so cool. But you can see it does run out of the buckets and milk really quickly. So it can do the harder recipes like concrete powder, campfires, enchanting tables, grindstone, ender crystals, blast furnace, soul torches, daylight detectors, pistons, comparators, tripwire hook, observer, repeater, dispenser, activator rail, detector rail, power rail, mushroom stew, suspicious stew, pumpkin pie, rush, arrows, crossbow, fermented spider eye, fire charge, complex firework stars and rockets, beacons, book and quill, and it can even craft the recipe that uses the most unique items, and that is the rabbit stew. Let's go ahead and watch this. Even though it's not a full 3x3 grid, you can see it uses 5 completely different items. And if they ever come out with any other recipe that uses even more, they'll have no problem doing it. More simple farms and machines in this playlist here, or watch me combine my farms together with the crafter to make farms that were never possible before, like a piston farm. And consider joining my YouTube membership community as all these lovely folks have. Thank you all for watching, I'll see you next one. Bye bye!